Washington College in 2012 took on the property of the Chestertown Armory in a pass-through agreement with the town, and it was being deaccessioned by the state, a process that was taking place throughout Maryland. Many of these armory-like facilities from the early part of the 20th century were no longer serving a useful purpose, and so they were looking to, the state was looking to divest itself of some of these properties. And so um, the town of Chestertown itself did not feel like, from a financial perspective, it was able to take on the property. And so, as we often do, the college sees itself as working in close partnership with the town. And we felt as though it was at least an opportunity for the college to add to some of its holdings and to find a new purpose for this building, which is on the National Register of Historic Places. And our hope was to work with the town to be able to find a good, active, new purpose for that site. Throughout the ensuing years, a couple of things happened. Number one, there were numerous attempts to try and find a purpose for the building. And I won't enumerate all of them here. They're pretty much all on record. But some of them included things like becoming the new home for the college's Center for Environment and Society. But there were a number of opportunities that were explored. All of them ended up being either cost prohibitive or just not really suited to the purpose. Sometimes they even duplicated things that we already offered on our main campus a few miles away. So that's one thing that took place, was sort of an exhaustive search to try to find a good purpose for the Chestertown Armory. The second thing that happened, unfortunately, was, well, sort of a conglomeration of events. Number one, there was some unfortunate leadership turnover at the college. So some of these projects ended up being a bit in stasis for a while due to that leadership turnover. Second of all, there was a global pandemic, which we're all familiar with, the disruptions that brought along with it. So prior to that pandemic, Jay and some of his partners were able to join the conversation and begin to think about what it would look like to rehabilitate that structure and create something that would be of tremendous benefit for Chestertown and Kent County and also the college, which would be a boutique hotel and a conference center. And I find it very interesting. Oftentimes, when we have this conversation, the conference center piece of it is not front and center. But that actually, in my mind, is one of the most attractive features of this project, because one of the things that Chestertown desperately needs and the college would benefit from is meeting spaces like a small conference center could provide. It would be great for sort of civic life to be able to have those kinds of facilities available. And also it would attract business to Kent County and to Chestertown. We would begin to see corporate retreats and all kinds of other interesting events coming across the Bay Bridge to enjoy the charms of a place like Chestertown. We become more of a destination that way.
I first came to the Eastern Shore as a kid. My dad, he had taken us to Baltimore, and we took one of those ferries across, and we went to the Crab Claw, in St. Michael. That was my first introduction to it. Then over the years, said something at that point. I was like, well, this is a beautiful place. And he was still, even then, it was kind of a hidden, the Eastern Shore. It's just always had a very low and understated profile, which, always interested me. So you fast forward a couple more years, and when I was in college, I actually came back here to learn how to sail at the Maryland School of Sailing in Rock Hall. It was a 4-day ASA 101 course. And I came with a college friend of mine who's from New York City. And that was a terrific experience for me. And then, after that, it kind of just stuck with me. There was something about the place. And sometimes it's hard to put a finger on until you've been around it for long enough. And so I'll get to, I think, why I loved it. But after learning how to sail here, I would come down from time to time. My wife and I would make an annual trip once a year, and we'd stay somewhere on the Eastern Shore. In the beginning, being a little less creative, we would go back to St. Michael's because it was a well-trodden path. But then over time, we started exploring more of the area and just really fell in love with it. By that point, I had read Mitch, and I'm kind of a Michener nerd. I've read all of his books, And I'm actually reading his memoir right now. It's at my home in Chestertown. Uh, but I had read Chesapeake by then. So once I read Chesapeake, that was like a roadmap to exploring the Eastern Shore. I think a lot of folks don't think about Pennsylvanians on the Eastern Shore, certainly up towards Kennedyville, Galena, there's some long-standing traditions, but even in Chestertown, the Philadelphia-Chestertown connection, Rock Hall, Philadelphia connection is, not insignificant, for the type of density we have here. So then I got caught up in my career, and I would come once a year with Susie, and then I was brought back to town by Kay McIntosh and Richard Kevin, because they told me that there's some talk around this town needing a hotel. And would you come down and talk to us about it? Richard Keveney knew that I loved Chestertown because we had met at a breakfast through a business associate at one point. He was looking to, operate one of his salons at one of our hotels. And although that deal didn't ultimately go anywhere, Richard had remembered that I had this strange but dated history with the Eastern Shore. So he brought me down there for that meeting with Kay and he to talk about a hotel. At the same time, I told him while I'm down there, I would love to do a little more exploring. So, we went and took some looks around. And, before you know it, I had just as much love for the Eastern Shore as I did as a kid and as a young man. And so within 6 months of that first meeting, I rented a farm out on Broadneck Road on the West Fork of the Langford Creek. And so that's kind of where I moved into the area. About 2 years later, I bought a home, which we just finished renovating. And so I've been here since. I love it for a lot of reasons. I love the what, and I love the who, and I love the where. The where is real simple. We can tick that one off. For me to drive from the western mainline suburbs in Philadelphia, it takes me an hour and 40 minutes to get to my respite. The what, and then the who, I'll do the who next, because the what is maybe the most obvious, but what's worth talking about the most. The who is I find the community to be just terrific. It is, I think it harkens back to a very values-driven, small town American community. And growing up, my father was a chemical engineer for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but some of his entrepreneurial ventures led him for us to live in Lancaster County for 3 years. And we lived in a small town called Elizabethtown, which, some of you may be familiar with, not dissimilar in some ways to Chestertown. Elizabethtown had Elizabethtown College and was an otherwise very small community, at the time, maybe 8,000 residents there. And, those were 3 important years for me. And I just, it was my exposure to small communities in the States, and I loved it. My business takes me all over the place, all over the world, and I'm very fortunate for that. But when we have personal time, we like to find places that reflect our values. So, I love the community in Chestertown. And then the what is just, it's the most immersive nature experience one can have.